Very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Morning, it's 9:30 on Thursday, the 6th of July. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Thank you for joining us. So, former government whip Chris Pincher is facing an 8-week suspension over groping allegations. It means that the government is likely to face a 4th by-election this summer.
And after an astonishing launch and all the excitement yesterday, our Don't Kill Cash campaign continues. Another 30,000 sign-ups after we hit 100,000 on this show yesterday.
Another major event, another 2 Just Stop Oil disruptions yesterday at Wimbledon. When are the authorities going to finally act and toughen up with these so-called protesters? We're going to have one very famous protester, Swampy, in the studio.
And watch out, Twitter. Those billionaire titans Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk are launching a big head-to-head campaign for who's going to be king of social media.
So that didn't make any sense because it is a little bit confusing, this. So Twitter, run by Elon Musk, now has a rival in something called Threads, run by Mark Zuckerberg, who also runs Facebook and Instagram. And frankly, if you've got time to burn all of them, you need to do something more with your day.
Haven't these billionaires got better things to do with their money?
Anyway, let us know your thoughts. We have got a Threads account at GB News, so do go and follow us and have a look at it, see what you think. Email us today as well. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. But first of all, here is your latest news with Rhiannon Jones.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 9:31. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom. The Standards Committee has recommended that former government whip Chris Pincher be suspended for 8 weeks. Mr Pincher's accused of drunkenly assaulting 2 men at London's Carlton Club. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson told GB News the suspension could lead to a by-election.
Suspension of that length is a very serious sanction, and I think the expectation is that that would then now lead to a by-election. The length of that suspension is very serious. I would also add that I do find it incredibly frustrating that once again we're talking about the completely inappropriate behaviour of a Conservative Member of Parliament.
The High Court set to rule if the government must hand over to the COVID inquiry Boris Johnson's unredacted WhatsApp messages, notebooks and diaries. The Cabinet Office launched a legal challenge to Chairwoman Baroness Hallett's order, arguing many of the documents would be irrelevant. A decision's expected early this afternoon. The former Prime Minister is backing Lady Hallett, having made the material available in late May. Sir Keir Starmer will pledge to smash the class ceiling by reforming education if his party wins the next election. The Labour leader is expected to set a goal of 500,000 more children reaching their early learning targets by 2030. The proposal includes hiring 6,500 more teachers and prioritising language skills. Police forces across Britain have carried out the largest ever crackdown on cannabis farms, raiding more than 1,000 facilities. During the month-long Operation Mile, 200,000 plants were seized, worth £130 million. 1,000 suspects were arrested. The raids involved every police force in England, Wales and Scotland. And 4 British players are taking to the courts on day 4 of Wimbledon. It follows yesterday's disruption by protesters. Sir Andy Murray takes on Greek Stefanos Tsitsipas on centre court. Katie Boulter's also set to play. The British #1 said yesterday's interruption by Just Stop Oil was a shock to the system. The government has urged organisers to beef up security. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now, though, it's back over to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us on GB News. Now, some breaking news this morning. Chris Pincher, the former Tory Deputy Chief Whip, should be suspended from the Commons for 8 weeks, according to the Commons Standards Committee, who released their report this morning.
This was over allegations he groped 2 fellow guests in the Carlton Club, which is part of the Tory establishment. The committee looked into this and has recommended 8 weeks. It will almost certainly mean a 4th by-election on the way for Rishi Sunak, a by-election the Tories do not need at all.
So, Arlene Foster, I think we were going to have a clip there, but I don't think we've got that. Arlene Foster is with us this morning. This is the last thing that Rishi Sunak needs, isn't it? Another by-election, another headache to deal with.
Absolutely. And I mean, it also brings into stark relief what happened at that time. And don't forget, this was the beginning of the end for Boris Johnson as well. If the committee has recommended 8 weeks, there is no way the Commons will not back that, given what happened at that time with Owen Paterson. You will recall that they tried to change the committee recommendations in respect of him, and that was the whole start of what went wrong then. I just think that this means another by-election, and as you say, Rishi Sunak definitely does not need this.
And it does call into account the whole point about Boris Johnson's judgment, particularly about the people he surrounded himself with, because he claimed he didn't know there were allegations against Chris Pincher, which were repudiated by the former Foreign Office Mandarin, who wrote a letter to a national newspaper saying not only was he told face-to-face that there were serious allegations about Chris Pincher's conduct, and Boris then said he forgot, which I don't frankly believe.
Well, I don't believe it either. I think he just wanted to keep Chris Pincher in position. I mean, at that time, I wasn't in the House of Lords at that time, but I mean, even I knew that there were rumours around Chris Pincher, and that was just me being around the House of Commons and around politics. So for Boris to claim that he didn't know, I think is just not credible, frankly. And it was the start of the process where they started resigning. Other problems for Rishi Sunak, of course. You've been in the House of Lords all week. A record
20 defeats inflicted on the government's migration bill by a combination of Labour, the Lib Dems and the so-called independent crossbenchers.
And the bishops, let's not forget the bishops.
Yes, and let's not forget that man Welby, that wretched archbishop.
Because the bishops did take a leading role in all of this. Archbishop Welby saying that we need an immigration system with justice and compassion, and being very emotional about all of that. But look, I think sometimes members of the House of Lords, and I am a member of the House of Lords, forget our role. Our role is as a revising chamber. We are not the government. We are not elected. We are there to revise laws, to make them better, to get into the detail of it, but not to change the policy. Yeah. And that's the fundamental issue. And what some Lords are trying to do are to change the policy of the government. And I presume that when it goes back to the Commons today, you will see the Commons saying, well, thank you very much, but we're sticking with our bill. Yeah. And then it'll end up coming back to us and we'll say, no, well, there'll be more votes. There'll be what's called ping pong. Yeah. And the government will prevail. And that's the way it is.
Do you think they're overstepping their mark, some of these peers? And is it right that the bishops are? I mean, is it a quirk of the British Constitution? We've got 26 Anglican peers there. There are no... Sorry, bishops there. There are no Roman Catholic bishops there because of our constitution. Are they overstepping their mark?
Well, we still have an established church here in England, and it is the Anglican Church. And frankly, I think it is good to have faith in politics. As somebody of faith in politics, I think it is good to have that in the public square. But I think they have to understand their role. And their role is, yes, to be a voice for people of faith, but they are a voice for people of a certain faith, and not even from everybody from that faith, because as an Anglican, I don't always recognise what's coming from the bishops' benches. So I think there is a need for the bishops to recognise that they don't speak for everybody of faith, and what they're doing is speaking in their own capacity.
And this whole Rwanda politics, it's all about stop the boats. This is one of Rishi's 5 pledges. Do you sense it's ever going to get off the ground? We know it's already come unstuck in the Court of Appeal. It's going to go to the Supreme Court now. If he doesn't get those planes in the air, he's never going to stop the boats, is he?
Well, I mean, this was announced last April, as you know, in April 2022, and we haven't had one person sent to Rwanda because of legal challenges. Got through the High Court, now the Court of Appeal, not on a unanimous verdict, and I think that's important, actually.
Yeah, and it was the Lord Chief Justice himself who voted in favour of the scheme.
Yeah, so I think it will now go to the Supreme Court, but all the while the boats keep coming, all the while money's been spent. I mean, apparently it's 140 million that has been spent already in Rwanda. And don't forget that our immigration system costs £3 billion per year. I mean, it's an incredible amount of money that we spend on this issue. So we need to find a solution.
How is it possible, Arlene, that we've already given so much money to Rwanda before we've even had one person on a plane? 140 million is enormous. What has that been spent on? Do we know?
Well, I presume it's spent on accommodation, and you will recall GBNews went out to Rwanda last year to look at the accommodation that had been set up for the asylum seekers. And it's also been set up in processes to make sure that everything is in order. However, the Court of Appeal said that they didn't believe that Rwanda as a third country was a safe place for these people, and that there were deficiencies in the asylum system there. So we then go now to the Supreme Court, but all the while, how can Rishi Sunak go to the electorate whenever the general election is and say, yes, we're going to deal with immigration, when we have this litany of failure in terms of asylum seekers?
What do you think? You talk about being a woman of faith. I'm a practicing Roman Catholic. I do resent it when people like Welby suggest that anybody who supports the Rwanda scheme is behaving almost in an immoral way, wicked, evil. I mean, how dare they say that?
And I think that's what I was trying to say. I mean, he's there as an Anglican representative. I'm an Anglican. He doesn't speak for me. No. And yet he makes me feel as if I'm some sort of an evil person because I support Rwanda scheme and I support dealing with immigration, not least because there are many people in the UK who can't get access to services that they need to get access to. And what about those people? Do we not care about those people? And so it has become a zero-sum game, and instead of trying to look for solutions, we have people standing on soapboxes, frankly, giving us their moral judgments on what's happening. Let's get a solution to this.
Right.
You know, let's deal with it.
Keir Starmer is talking at just before 10:30 this morning, and we're not going to bring it to you live. We are going to bring you the best bits.
No, because you don't want to send people to sleep. Because he's a very boring speaker.
But he's going to unveil the Labour Party's fifth and final mission for a better Britain, Arlene. And the one bit which has been picked up by a lot of the media today is this idea of education and teaching children the skills of oration, teaching children to speak. It seems so obvious. I mean, it seems extraordinary that we have to teach children to speak, but I think this is a really clever idea, actually. I think a lot of parents will like to hear this.
I think a lot of parents will identify with it because when they see their teenage kids like this and texting each other even though they're in the same room and communicating in that way. I mean, I once got a text from my son who was in his bedroom asking for a cup of tea.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I regularly get that.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
This is the sort of thing that I think we have to be... So it's actually... Why do we have to...
What was your reply? Did you reply by text or did you shout up the stairs?
No, I did not
Get down here.
reply by text. But... this is the world they live in. And we can't ignore that. And I think it's right that we do address it. But my goodness, what are our schools doing if we can't have kids come and have a conversation with each other? But there is a problem, and I think Labour has been quite clever in identifying it. It's just how they now deal with it. I thought it was also quite interesting that he's making a speech in Kent, because, of course, Kent still has grammar schools. And we in Northern Ireland still have grammar schools. And he's going to talk today about social mobility. And how kids, you know, you shouldn't let your background define your destiny. I absolutely believe that. I was the first in my family to go to university as well, and that was because I went to a grammar school. And I went to a grammar school because of academic selection.
What better vehicle for social mobility is there than a grammar school?
Well, I fundamentally believe that. I know Labour certainly doesn't believe that. But he's going to talk today about valuing academia and vocational skills. I think that's absolutely right. And one of the difficulties is that we don't value vocational pathways in the same way as we do academic pathways.
Although I think, ironically, that pretty much happened under Blair, if my memory serves me correctly.
He set a target that more than 50% of all school leavers should go to university, and then we had the proliferation of, frankly, some rather silly degree courses.
Dance with drama. Drama with dance.
Yeah, and also it was about that time that suddenly the idea of being a carpenter, an electrician, a plumber, all the skills that we so desperately need now, suddenly that was deemed to be sort of beneath children. And therefore we shouldn't be teaching, particularly boys who actually enjoy often working with their hands and those sort of more traditional skills. We've lost so many of those.
And let me say this, Bev, if you are a carpenter, if you are an electrician, you're going to earn a lot of money.
You can name your price at the moment.
You're going to earn a lot of money. And this is what I say to young people. Not everybody has to be a brain surgeon. Actually, you can make a lot of money, provide for your family, have nice holidays, all of that, by taking the vocational route.
You're never going to be out of work. What's the guy who set up Pimlico Plumbers?
Charlie
Mullins.
Charlie Mullins. I mean, he set an incredible success story. He started off with one old van and one bag of tools, and look how successful that company's been.
I think this particular policy that Starmer's going to set out, like I say, just before 10:30, is very much about, as well, positioning the Labour Party vision of the future very differently to the Conservative Party. Because Rishi Sunak, of course, said he wanted maths obligatory until 18 for children, which obviously my children met with horror. And that's a very technocratic, kind of sort of, you know, sat looking at a screen doing this. Whereas for Starmer to say, I want people to talk well, that's about having healthy relationships, it's about being happy, it's about being able to talk in the workplace or your GP. It's very clever politically to say this is what I think matters.
It is, as long as it's delivered in the appropriate way, because we don't want to get into a situation where we're turning out little robots that all speak in the same way. I mean, we've got to a stage now in the UK where we value regional accents, for example, and I think that's really important that we continue to do that. But having conversations, being able to speak with people, being able to communicate, I think is really, really important for our young people. And they're not going to get it by doing this.
No.
They are going to get it by eye contact and being able to speak with
people. I bet your son hasn't sent you any more text messages in the house demanding a cup of tea.
You'd be surprised.
I'd love to have heard your response.
I'll tell you off air.
All right. Arlene, thank you for coming. Arlene, remind us what time your show is.
Well, I'm actually covering for Michael Portillo. When Michael goes off, I cover for him. And then we're starting this new politics show, as you know, in the autumn with Chris Hope leading on that. So we're very much
And next Wednesday, You're giving me and Andrew a day off because
We are
doing a special next
We're doing a
Wednesday.
special next Wednesday on the 12th of July in Northern Ireland, live from Belfast City, and we'll have lots of fun and lots of excitement.
Remind people why 12th of July is significant.
The 12th of July is significant. It was about the Battle of the Boyne in 1690, but it's not just about a battle that took place on the island of Ireland. It actually led to the Glorious Revolution, which impacted the whole of the United Kingdom. And we'll be talking a little bit about that, actually, about why it's significant, not just in terms of Irish politics, but actually European politics. And I think that's really important.
Those Dutch came over here. Those Dutch people in the Glorious Revolution. Arnie, lovely to see you.
Thank you. Thanks a million.
Well, let's turn to Westminster now for more reaction on this report that suggests Chris Pincher, who was Boris Johnson's Deputy Chief Whip, should be suspended from the Commons for 8 weeks after groping young men at the Carlton Club. As Arlene Foster said, the Commons will vote, or I would say unanimously, to do that, which is almost certainly going to trigger a by-election. Our political reporter, Olivia Utley, is with us in Westminster. Olivia, morning.
Morning.
Well, this is a disaster for the Conservative Party, isn't it? Almost certainly now there'll be a fourth by-election, and Pincher may have a 19,000 majority, but that will evaporate, I suspect.
Well, absolutely. It's a complete nightmare for Rishi Sunak. Politically, in terms of the sort of sitting current Conservative administration, it might not be that bad. Chris Pincher has already lost the party whip. And, of course, the way that Boris Johnson handled the affair precipitated his resignation. And, of course, Rishi Sunak, the current Prime Minister, was heavily involved in that. So it's not thought that Rishi Sunak personally will get sort of too much of the blame for Chris Pincher's behaviour. But this 8-week suspension, as you say, is almost certainly going to trigger a by-election. What will happen if the Commons back the motion put forward by the Standards Committee, which, as we've said, it sounds quite likely that they will, is there will be a recall petition, which essentially means that it's in the everything becomes in the court of Chris Pincher's constituents in Tamworth. Now, if 10% of them, just 10%, sign that recall petition, then there will be a by-election. And as you say, in normal times, that wouldn't be too much of an issue. There are he's got a 19,000 majority in Tamworth in Staffordshire. But, of course, Labour are going to throw everything that they've got at this by-election. We can expect thousands of Labour activists on the ground there. We can expect Keir Starmer to be rolling up his sleeves, taking off his tie, as we've seen so often, and campaigning very, very hard in Tamworth. And then, of course, if the Conservatives lose that seat, they have an 80-seat majority, slightly dwindled now, but roughly an 80-seat majority. So it won't be the end of the world in terms of actually getting laws passed in the House of Commons. But it will just bring up that feeling, really bubble to the surface that feeling that the momentum is all with Labour. And that is not what the Conservatives want a year out from a general election.
Just finally, Olivia, this goes to the heart of Boris Johnson's judgment, doesn't it? Because he insisted that nobody told him that there were allegations in the past about Pincher's behaviour, which he knew was blown out of the water by the former Foreign Office Permanent Secretary, Lord MacDonald, who said, oh, yes, he was told, and he was told face to face that Pincher had a history of inappropriate behaviour.
Well, absolutely, and this was the straw that broke the camel's back, really, with Boris Johnson. He has been warned, as Arlene Foster said, pretty much everyone in Westminster knew that there were rumours circulating about Chris Pincher's behaviour, and it sounds very much as though Boris Johnson simply ignored those rumours and chose to promote Chris Pincher to a whip's position, where whips have sort of quite a lot of pastoral care over MPs, or are supposed to anyway, regardless of what he'd heard. So that was really the straw that broke the camel's back for Boris Johnson. That is what eventually ended his career, although, of course, we know that there was a pretty big build-up to that before. So as Arlene Foster said there, not only is this a headache in terms of the Conservatives really not wanting a fourth by-election at a time when they are trailing so far behind in the polls, it also just reignites in people's minds in Westminster the whole calamity which brought down the previous Prime Minister, and adds to that general sense that the Tories aren't really in control of their own party.
Absolutely. That's Olivia Utley, our political reporter. And, of course, Boris Johnson made light of it all by saying, Pincher by name, Pincher by nature.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's just not funny anymore.
No.
Boris Bozza. You know, these young men were very young. They were embarrassed. It was in the Carlton Club in front of other people. He was under the influence of booze. No excuse for the behaviour.
It sort of makes you think that probably Boris is better off gone,
well,
maybe.
I think 50
this
minutes.
is the legacy that's lingering.
50 ministers resigned, and that was the end of him. The Pincher affair brought him down, no doubt about it, in the end.
Right, social media, it is a divisive topic, isn't it? Well, it's got a new battleground at the moment, Elon Musk versus Mark Zuckerberg, and here to explain it to us is GB News' digital man, Dan Falvey. It's Digital Man. What's your proper title, Dan?
Head of Digital News.
There we go.
So, let me take you through exactly what's happened here. So, Twitter, one of the biggest social media platforms on the planet, was bought by Elon Musk, at the time the richest man on the planet, several months ago. And he took hold of the social media platform and he said, I want to make this different. I want to make it more pro-free speech. Lots of accounts that had been shut down for breaking what were Twitter's old rules got reinstated. He's tried to shake up and make this kind of online platform where people can have these conversations far more free. At the same time, some of his changes have led to, it's fair to say, rather a lot of chaos. He's ended up sacking a lot of Twitter's old staff, and it's meant that Twitter doesn't run in the way that it used to. And here comes in Mark Zuckerberg, who founded Facebook in 2005, and he's gone, I think we can seize on this as an opportunity and launch our own social media to rival Twitter, where people can engage in these conversations on the biggest topics of the day.
So you would say, well, how is that different to Facebook? He's already got Facebook.
And this is the difference is that this is meant to be more. It's meant to be shorter. So Facebook, for example, you can write great big long posts. There's a 500-character limit when it comes to this new platform that's been set up by Zuckerberg, which is called Threads. You can still do it. It's very much like on Twitter. You can reshare posts of other people on Threads. You can rethread. You can share what other people have said and put it out there. So that's the plan. And I'm pleased to say that GB News is on there. We were the first UK media brand to join Threads. Mark Zuckerberg's trying to do things differently. GB News, we like to do things differently, so we thought we'd get behind it and let's take a look and see what happens.
Well done.
I read somewhere that Threads is going to be like Twitter, but run sanely.
That's certainly what Mark Zuckerberg hopes. He said, actually, that he hopes it's going to be more friendly. He says the key to success is being friendly. He doesn't want it to be this combative, angry...
But you see, he has Instagram for that. Instagram, which is mainly a photograph, image-based social media with some comments underneath, is a very friendly place compared to Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think he thinks, though, but that is all picture-based.
Yeah.
And I think he sees this as an opportunity for him to capitalise and dominate that entire market.
And Twitter is a cesspit.
Oh, I love it.
But it's pretty toxic stuff there. I mean, I never read what people say about me. I'm regularly told what people say about me. They're entitled to think that. But I do know who my father is, and...
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I can guarantee, having spent a couple of minutes talking to you on here with a perfectly pleasant, friendly conversation, I'm sure when we clip up this conversation, the comments that will come in underneath it will be... Some of them will just be vile and unnecessary.
Yeah. I couldn't care less, though.
No, I couldn't. I quite like some of the arguments that happen on. I like it. I like the sparring. I like the fact that you can put your opinion out there and people can tell you if you're right or wrong. I mean, I'm a big fan.
But what intrigues me most about this, Dan, is it's two billionaires vying to be top dog. Because for so long, Zuckerberg was king of the castle with Facebook and all the rest of it. Then Elon Musk comes piling into his territory, and now Zuckerberg's fighting back. Who's going to win the battle?
It's funny that you're there going piling in.
Exactly.
Because Elon Musk actually did say that he was quite happy to box Mark Zuckerberg.
I saw that.
You know,
in a cage boxing
absolutely.
contest.
So, you know, it really is rather, you know, for them it's a bit of sport.
Great publicity.
Yeah, it's two great egos,
We can't let you go down without talking about Don't Kill Cash.
Yes, so our GB News campaign, Don't Kill Cash, we're looking to try to protect physical currency until at least 2050 in the UK. We launched it on Monday. I spoke to you guys about it on Tuesday, and I'm pleased to say it keeps going from strength to strength. So just a few days in, more than 134,000
Shall I give you the exact number?
People. Go for the exact number.
As of the moment, we hit the 100,000 mark yesterday.
We did, and we're
thanks
smug
to you
about
at home.
that.
We're so pleased about that, because once you get to 100,000, you've got a chance to get it debated in Parliament, whatever it is. So thank you. We're now on 134,543. Let's get it to what? Should we aim for 140,000?
No, 150,000.
Oh,
150,000 by the end of the show. Just remind people, Dan, how they do it.
Yeah, so if people go onto the website, it's gbnews.com/cash. You can also just go straight onto Google and put in Don't Kill Cash, GB News, and you'll find the petition is right at the top there.
Great.
And what's brilliant about this, it's kind of can capture everyone, no matter what their views are across the political spectrum. So it was fantastic yesterday. We saw Mick Lynch, who would have thought, backing a GB News campaign.
Man.
Absolutely.
Well, I shall be joshing him about that when I next cross
Well, it's fantastic. So you've got a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere, but while you're sat there on the sofa, pick up your phone, sign our petition, and we'll be back in just a minute. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It is 10 o'clock on Thursday, the 6th of July. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev Turner and Andrew Pierce.
And another major event, another 2 Just Stop Oil disruptions at Wimbledon yesterday. Are the authorities ever going to finally act and toughen up with these so-called protesters? We're going to be joined in a moment by the legendary environmental activist, Swampy, otherwise known as Dan.
And former government whip Chris Pincher is facing an 8-week suspension over groping allegations. It means that the government is likely to face a nightmarish 4th by-election this summer.
And after a glamorous launch and all the excitement yesterday, our Don't Kill Cash campaign continues to grow. Another 30,000 sign-ups after hitting 100,000 yesterday on this very show.
And more than 1,000 cannabis farms across Britain have been raided by police in a massive sting, seizing £130 million worth of the drug. We're going to be speaking to a former police officer about this massive haul. We did check that Swampy doesn't mind being called Swampy.
We did.
It seems terribly disrespectful. We're going to be talking to him in just a moment about Just Stop Oil protesters. Lots more as well. Keep your emails coming. gbnews@gbnews.com is the address. But first of all, here is the very latest news with Rhiannon Jones.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 10. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Standards Committee has recommended former government whip Chris Pincher be suspended for 8 weeks. Mr Pincher is accused of drunkenly assaulting 2 men at London's Carlton Club. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson told GB News the suspension could lead to a by-election.
Suspension of that length is a very serious sanction, and I think the expectation is that that would then now lead to a by-election. The length of that suspension is very serious. I would also add that I do find it incredibly frustrating that once again we're talking about the inappropriate, completely inappropriate behaviour of a Conservative Member of Parliament.
The High Court set to rule if the government must hand over to the COVID inquiry Boris Johnson's unredacted WhatsApp messages, notebooks and diaries. The Cabinet Office launched a legal challenge to Chairwoman Baroness Hallett's order, arguing many of the documents would be irrelevant. A decision's expected early this afternoon. The former Prime Minister's backing Lady Hallett, having made the material available in late May. Sir Keir Starmer will pledge to smash the class ceiling by reforming education if his party wins the next election. The Labour leader is expected to set a goal of 500,000 more children reaching their early learning targets by 2030. The proposal includes hiring 6,500 more teachers and prioritising language skills. Labour's main objective is to remove any obstacles in the way of equal opportunities and to improve learning outcomes for all. The Health Secretary is meeting a range of experts today in a bid to cut NHS waiting lists and improve patient care. The NHS Recovery Summit will be attended by ministers, clinical leaders and senior executives. They'll consider how new technology, such as AI, could be used to transform care and improve access to services. It comes after Health Minister Maria Caulfield admitted waiting lists in England are set to increase. The financial watchdog continues talks with bank chiefs over concerns they're failing to pass on the rise in interest rates to savers. Officials from the Financial Conduct Authority are meeting with bosses from HSBC, NatWest, Lloyds and Barclays. They'll ask why savers' interest rates are lagging behind the cost of mortgages. Recent data shows the average savings rate stands at 2.48%. The average 2- and 5-year fixed mortgage rate recently passed 6%. Communities across England and Wales will see more police patrolling hotspot areas of antisocial behaviour. The move marks the next steps in delivering the Prime Minister's action plan to build stronger communities. Offenders will face tougher and swifter consequences, including being made to repair any damage they've caused. Home Secretary Suella Braverman says antisocial behaviour causes misery to many.
More visible, integrated, responsive policing in communities, responding to issues like vandalism, like graffiti, like gangs loitering and congregating in a hostile and aggressive way.
Police forces across Britain have carried out the largest ever crackdown on cannabis farms, raiding more than 1,000 facilities. During the month-long Operation Mile, 200,000 plants were seized, worth £130 million. 1,000 suspects were arrested. The raids involved every police force in England, Wales and Scotland. More than 10 million people, including a spate of celebrities, have already signed up for Meta's new app, Threads. In its first few hours, the Twitter rival, which is linked to Instagram, went live in the UK at midnight last night. Users can post up to 5 minutes worth of video and 500 characters of text. Celebrities have already created profiles, include Gordon Ramsay, Shakira and Lad Baby. And 4 British players are taking to the courts on day 4 of Wimbledon. It follows yesterday's disruption by Just Stop Oil protesters. Sir Andy Murray takes on Greek Stefanos Tsitsipas on centre court after fellow Brit Liam Brodie plays Norwegian Casper Ruud. Katie Boulter's also set to play. The British #1 said yesterday's interruption by Just Stop Oil was a shock to the system. Prime Minister Chris Philp says the government's urged organisers to beef up security.
We also met with the organisers of various sporting events to ask them to take more action in terms of more marshals, more stewards, searching people where necessary, policing or manning the perimeter of sports fields, and also considering taking out injunctions, which have been used successfully as well. Because, just in the same way we don't want people to be stopped from going about their day-to-day business, we also don't want these sporting events to be disrupted.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back over to Bev and Andrew.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. In the past hour, Chris Pincher, the former Tory Deputy Chief Whip, should be suspended from the Commons for 8 weeks, according to the Commons Standards Committee, who released their report this morning.
It's another headache for the Prime Minister. This is all to do with Pincher behaving inappropriately in the Carlton Club, because it was the thing that triggered the beginning of the end for Boris Johnson, and it will almost certainly mean that by-election for Rishi Sunak, and despite the 19,000 majority, I suspect they'll lose it.
Yeah, let's turn to Westminster now for more reaction on this Chris Pincher 8-week suspension. Joining us now is Olivia Utley. Olivia, it's a very safe seat that Chris Pincher has there, but nothing is guaranteed for the Conservative Party at the moment, and particularly when somebody leaves under this sort of shadow, the voters may well turn against them.
Well, absolutely. It's a 19,000 majority, which in normal times one would consider very safe indeed. But of course, for a very long time now, the Conservatives have been consistently trailing in the polls. And it's thought that Labour are going to throw everything that they've got at this by-election. They will be campaigning really, really hard there. We can expect to see thousands of Labour activists on the ground. We can expect to see most of the shadow ministers up in Tamworth campaigning. It would be a huge coup for Labour to win this seat. Overturning a 19,000 Conservative majority would be fantastic for any political party in any times, but particularly now when it feels so much as though the momentum is moving towards Labour. There was the Spectator Party last night and it was filled with Labour faces, for example. We can feel that Keir Starmer is chomping at the bit to be the Prime Minister in waiting. So it would be huge for Labour to overturn that majority, and they will do everything in their power to try and achieve that. We know that this is a particular headache for Rishi Sunak because it's not by any means the only by-election that he's facing. In the next few months, we're expecting to see 5 by-elections, 3 Conservative MPs who have stepped down, Nigel Adams, Boris Johnson, and we're expecting Nadine Dorries to step down too as well. And then Chris Pincher and David Warburton, who were both suspended from the Commons after sexual misconduct allegations. And as you say, when an MP steps down in those circumstances, it's even more likely that their constituents and the country at large will turn against their party. So this is exactly what Rishi Sunak does not need at this stage.
All right, that's Olivia Utley, our political reporter. You know, there's echoes of John Major here and his dying administration in the 90s. Week after week, there were scandals, resignations and by-elections, all of which they lost. And just suggests a government that's beginning to fall apart after nearly 14 years in power. Anyway, talking of the government, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, she's backing the use of force to deal with disruptive activists. Hurrah for that. After Just Stop Oil, activists stormed Wimbledon twice in 2 hours yesterday.
One protester threw jigsaw pieces brought onto the site and confetti around the court as the Home Secretary hosted a summit of police and sports bosses to discuss preventing such disruptions.
Suella Braverman met with representatives from the Premier League, the Lawn Tennis Association, Silverstone, where the British Grand Prix takes place this weekend.
So earlier we spoke to the Policing and Crime Minister, who said that government action has already improved how these disruptions are dealt with.
Look, we've made a lot of progress with these highly disruptive protests. Let's start by acknowledging, of course, people have the right to protest, but what Just Stop Oil are doing is not legitimate protest. They are seeking to deliberately disrupt the lives of fellow citizens by blocking streets, stopping people getting to hospital for appointments, stopping parents getting their children to school, stopping people getting to work. Now, if you remember last autumn, they blocked the M25 repeatedly. There were 10-mile tailbacks. That has now stopped. We've strengthened the law enormously in a couple of different areas with our new Public Order Act just in the last few weeks. So we're now seeing the Metropolitan Police in London clearing the streets of obstructions within a matter of a few minutes. So all of that is a huge improvement.
So joining us now in the studio is eco-warrior and environmental activist Daniel Hooper, also known as Swampy. Morning, Daniel. Just remind everybody why you got that nickname and the sorts of protests that you became famous for.
Well, it's the road protests in the 90s, or general environmental protests of the 90s, and tunnel evictions specifically, I suppose.
And didn't you spend quite a lot of time up a tree?
Yeah, I spent time up trees and all sorts, really, yeah.
First time I met you, Daniel, I interviewed you when you were up a tree on Wanstead Common, objecting to a massive road expansion, and it was when you first sprung into national prominence. And here you are still protesting.
Yeah, we're still, you know, it's the issue hasn't gone away. We won the road building, you know, we stopped the road building programme, which was a good thing. And imagine if they had put all the money that they were putting into there and energy that they were putting into roads into nudging people off the roads and onto public transport and making it affordable. We could be in a much better position now, couldn't we?
How long ago was that when you were doing that? What would that have been?
90s.
In the 90s?
Yes, it was, yeah. Probably Newbury was 96, I think.
Yeah.
Wow. So in a way, you were ahead of your time because you caused such a stir with your disruptive action. What do you make of the Just Stop Oil protesters now? Do you support what they're doing?
I think whether, you know, people support them or not, kind of in some way irrelevant, because we're all caring about climate change, and also these people are really brave people to be doing that. They're risking their liberty to do it. So whether we support the action or not, I think, you know, it's irrelevant. We need to do something about climate change.
But isn't it counterproductive when they alienate so many people with these tactics, whether it's blocking people going to work, blocking people getting to a hospital, cancer appointment, ambulances not unable to get through because they're blocking roads?
Well, as I say, I mean, I'm not a member of these groups, so I can't speak on their behalf. What I will say is that, you know, people who care about climate change need to do something about climate. They're not going to see these actions and go, oh, I'm going to get a bigger car now, you know.
Oh, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. I don't think it's that necessarily people think I'm going to get a bigger car now, but I think that the backlash, we're looking at footage here. This was a guy trying to get to work in his white van, and he can't get to work because these people are blocking the road. The reaction, the support that this man got for being wrestled off the road when they disrupted.
And he was handcuffed. He was handcuffed by the police.
I mean, and I think I think it is slightly counterproductive. You know what also worries me a little bit, and you probably share my concerns about this? The measures that these people take are so high profile, they're so annoying on a very basic level, that they are enabling the government to push through stricter and stricter protest laws, which will affect potentially everybody.
Here we agree. I mean, the fact is that, you know, the laws have already gone way too far, you know, with this administration. You know, we already had laws in place to stop, you know, on the old laws. I'm getting prosecuted on the old laws, and you know, the laws are tough enough. You know, without protest, we don't get good change. So, you know, I think most major change or most meaningful change that's happened has been helped along by protest, and we need to be able to protest still. Otherwise, things don't, you know, we might still have women might not have the vote, you know, racism and homophobia might be acceptable. You know, we need to protest and the road building programme, you know, let's...
But Just Stop Oil are the stick, or they are the excuse, sorry, that the government will use to push through really, really strong legislation. Does Just Stop Oil just not care about that? I'm not a member of Just Stop Oil, so I really couldn't tell you whether, you know, whether they care about it. What I would say is the laws have gone way too far. We're getting very, very right-wing about this, and I hope when Labour get in the next election that they reverse these laws. I'd implore them to do that. But no law ever that gives the government more control will ever be reversed. It doesn't matter who is in power.
But these laws have gone so far that they need to be reversed.
But I read an article with you in the Times, Daniel, where you said some of the Just Stop Oil tactics, the expression used was, they're just not cricket. They're not playing fairly. Do you still believe that?
That was actually what I actually said, which sort of paraphrased me there, was that climate change is just not cricket. I was trying to make a joke.
Haven't the climate zealots already won? Like, we're working towards the 2030 agenda. We're working towards the 2050 agenda. We're all being encouraged to live smaller, colder, more empty lives under the guise of saving the planet, is what it feels like. And nobody has given us a referendum on that.
As yet, I mean, you know, this is the problem, isn't it? The government, and yet the government are funding North Sea oil extraction. They're, you know, they're giving licences to coal extraction. We're going the opposite way.
Yeah, but people can't afford this. What's happening with their gas and electric bills every month, Daniel, because they just can't. There's a cost of living crisis, and they're paying every month subsidies for green energy.
They're paying more because the oil companies are making more profit because they're profiteering on crisis. That's why we're paying more. It's not the people, it's not the green agenda that's pushing the prices up.
Yes, it is.
No. What's pushing the prices up is the greed of the oil companies. Yeah. They're making record profits.
We're going to get in London.
Let's stop them.
Happening all over the country, ultra-low emission zones, £12.50 to drive in. Every part of London's going to be covered. They've got it in Derby, Glasgow, coming to Manchester. That's costing people money. These green measures are hurting people in the pocket.
Well, I couldn't comment. I mean, I don't think... you know, I wouldn't want to comment too much on the low energy zones, but I do think it's just pushing traffic out to another place in the cities, perhaps. You know, arguably, but...
I guess, I'm guessing you don't have a car. Do you have a car?
I do have a car.
You do have a car, OK.
Is it a Tesla?
Pardon?
I
can't afford a Tesla.
But that's because these green measures are so expensive. You can't afford a Tesla.
I caught the train to London. I catch the train and public transport where I can.
Yeah. But your car, is your car ULEZ compliant? Or would you... you live in Wales now, you live off-grid in a commune. I don't want to be too personal, I understand that. But unless you've got a very new and rather expensive car, you won't be able to drive it in a ULEZ zone without paying at least a tenner.
I'm not going... I mean, I don't think that, personally, that getting, you know, electric cars are the main solution.
You don't think that?
No, I think there are many solutions, but I don't think that's the main solution. I don't think it's the only...
What sort of car do you drive?
I think this is irrelevant. I think what's relevant.
I
drove a Skoda.
So that's not environmentally friendly. But that's the point I'm making, Daniel. People can't afford to comply with these green measures.
What needs to happen?
And yet we're going to be told we've got to get rid of these cars by 2030. People can't afford it.
No, but we should be able to afford public transport.
And you're driving a car which breaks all the rules, everything that you're against. Your car embodies it.
We should be able to afford public transport. This is the problem. Public transport's getting more and more expensive. Your average person, for them, it's much cheaper to drive somewhere than to catch the train or even the coach.
Yeah.
You know, and this is the problem. We need to make public transport better and more affordable.
Aren't you a bit embarrassed that you're driving a Skoda?
Well, I need it for work.
Well, so do a lot of people. And people who are going to drive into London,
I live in
are now going to have to pay £12.50 a day on top of the congestion charge because of an ultra-low emission zone, which nobody thinks is going to cut pollution anyway.
What we need... I think the fact... I'm not going to argue about the so-called green... you know, there's a lot of green solutions that are offered to us that are, on the surface, look green, but aren't perhaps as green as we'd like them to be.
So does that mean, can you see, therefore, that there are invested corporate interests in the green agenda that have hijacked it at all of our expense?
Of course there is, but I think also we need to... we still need to go forward and we still need to work with these people, but I don't think we should hand over the cheque to multinational companies to get richer off it. No. I think we need to look at real solutions. But, you know, the government should be... Like with COVID, we had... the government had experts saying we need to do this, and you know there was a panel set up. People listened. People would listen if the government put the agenda, you know, said actually were honest about the scope of the crisis, and you know people would fly a lot less. People would drive, you know, wonder whether their journeys are necessary.
We will be encouraged to fly less. You know who won't fly less are the billionaires and the people who are pushing through the green agenda. We are the ones that are going to suffer, I think.
Well, I think we're in agreement about the billionaires that cashing in on the green agenda.
But I think we have to be awake. Yeah, but I agree. But I think all of us have to be awake to the fact that if it was so catastrophic, they would also be making the same compromises. Well, if the world was going to be over in the next 50 years, even the billionaires who apparently know more about
you're not climate change denying, are you?
But that's what happens, isn't it? That's what happens when you say, are you climate change denying? That's why this conversation gets shut down, because that phrase is just so convenient. Well, and you made the comparison with COVID. It's the same. People say, oh, you're a COVID denier. Well, no, I'm not. But I believe there is nuance to this conversation, and I like the fact that we need to talk about it rather than have it censored.
I think where we're probably agreeing is that climate change is probably caused, or mostly caused, by human greed. Do we agree on that?
I'm not yet convinced of that.
Right,
I'm not yet. I don't know enough about it, but I'm not convinced because I think there is too much profit baked in for people to make us believe that.
Not our greed, but the greed of people who are cashing in. Or, you know, we don't need to buy as much stuff as we got. You know, we're consuming. And consumerism is what causes climate change.
We could all consume less for the sake of our oceans and our air, I agree, but you know what I quite like? I like to heat my home and I like to be able to feed my kids on a cooker, and that's what we're being encouraged.
Of course, and let's do it in a green way.
All right, Daniel, thank you for coming in.
Daniel.
And I'm glad you came in on a train and didn't drive your fuel-guzzling Skoda.
Nothing embarrassing about a Skoda, anyway. I don't think you meant specifically the brand, did you?
No,
You just
I
meant
didn't
a car
mean
in
the brand,
general.
just the car. Yeah.
Right, thank you, Daniel.
Thank you for coming in.
Still to come, Transport for London has banned posters. We talked about this yesterday.
Maddening.
The Broadway hit Tony and Tina's wedding because it features a Victoria sponge. We'll let you know why. We'll have a reaction from the theatre community. See you in a minute.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 11:28. You're with Britain's Newsroom.
10:28.
10:28. Yes, 10:28.
Wishing away the end of our week.
Wouldn't want to do that to you. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So this caught our eye. A poster promoting the Broadway hit Tony and Tina's Wedding has been banned because it features a cake.
This is the worst sort of nanny state nonsense in Transport for London, which is, of course, run by Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan. They banned the ad as it breached their strict obesity rules about the consumption of high-fat, salt and sugar food.
It just makes me giggle.
It's ridiculous.
Mark Ryan Parsons, one of the original actors in Tony and Tina's Wedding, joins us now. Mark, good to see you. I mean, look, this cake was very appetising. It did look very appetising, but I'm not sure it would have caused me to suddenly become obese. Just explain to our viewers what this meant for the production.
Yeah, I think the decision is absolutely ridiculous and insane, really. It's a gorgeous wedding cake. I remember actually doing a photo shoot for it, and we loved it, and it was all over Stratford where we had the original show, and now it's moved on to another venue. But I just think the decision to ban it on TfL is absurd, and Sadiq Khan, I think, has lost the plot. I don't understand how this gorgeous-looking wedding cake would cause a child to look at it and decide to eat more food to an extent where they could become obese. I think it's so woke. It's so extreme. And actually, I think TfL need to be looking at some of the other adverts that they've authorised on their tubes and underground platforms where they're promoting cosmetic surgery to go to Turkey. What about all of the health implications there?
Very good point.
It's absolutely ridiculous, as I said.
And the thing is, Mark, the thing is about this, which really annoys me, this is a well-known production which did 30 years on Broadway. It's coming into London. Theatres are struggling like everybody else to get bums on seats because of the cost of living crisis. And a great showcase for that production would be the London Underground, tube stations and tube carriages. And the mayor has banned it, which could have a really bad effect on the box office of what's going to be a very, very funny show, which I'm going to see, by the way.
No, thank you. Yes, it's just so cruel in that sense as well, because I know the producer has spent so much money on, number one, getting the photos done, marketing it, getting it advertised. It's very costly. And to then have this decision ruled against them, they have to go back to the marketing team, they have to redesign the poster. All of this incurs costs, and it's an expensive business to run. I mean, having a show in the West End, he previously ran the show in Stratford as well, where we performed. I mean, it has been hugely expensive, and this is just going to be detrimental in terms of whether the show could survive, I'm assuming, because it's all adding to the costs that are already very high.
And it's not as if the poster is exhorting people to get stuck in and eat the flipping cake. It's the potential bride and groom are dancing on top of the cake. So it's all about romance and marriage. And it's not a charter for fatsos to eat too much cake.
Exactly. There's nothing on the cake saying, you know, head to the cake shop and buy 10 cakes and get fat. It's a deep cut, I think, being boring and glum, as he always is, and he's just being a real killjoy, and he's just wanting to eliminate any kind of fun or enjoyment on the underground.
Do you know what it is as well? Do you know what, Ryan Mark? Do you know what it is as well? It's that its computer says no, lack of humanity in any decisions. This is the TfL statement. A spokesperson said, "We welcome all advertising on our network that complies with our published guidance. We're always happy to work with brands to help them follow our advertising policy." You know, presumably then shuffled their papers and moved on to the next stupid point.
It's pathetic. Just very briefly, the show is great fun, isn't it? It's a great comedy and romantic too.
Yes, the show is great fun. I am no longer involved in the show anymore. I was actually in the show with Vanessa Feltz's ex, Ben Afedu. Oh. And unfortunately, we both had to leave. And it's not to do with the cast. It's a really fun show. The cast is amazing. It's the producer and director. They're just very awful people to work for. So we were forced to leave. Oh. We had really no other choice. But actually, I would still recommend watching the show because the cast is amazing. They're all friends with me and Ben. But yeah, it's just a shame about the production.
OK, well, those people aren't here to defend themselves, Ryan, so I'm sure there might be two sides to that story, but always good to see you. Friend of the channel, Ryan Mark Parsons, one of the original actors in Tony and Tina's Wedding. Right, moving on.
Let's hear it for Victoria Sponge wedding cakes.
I love a Victoria Sponge with a pot of tea. There's nothing nicer. Right, am I going to get encouraged for encouraging obesity for that?
Sure.
Sorry, I hope Sadiq Khan's not watching. Right, still to come. Mark White joins us to discuss a row over whether police officers can wear uniform flag patches as a mark of respect to fallen colleagues. That's all after your morning's news with Rihanna.
Bev, thank you. It's 10:34, your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Standards Committee has recommended that former government whip Chris Pincher be suspended for 8 weeks. Mr Pincher's accused of drunkenly assaulting 2 men at London's Carlton Club. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson told GB News the suspension could lead to a by-election.
Suspension of that length is a very serious sanction, and I think the expectation is that that would then now lead to a by-election. The length of that suspension is very serious. I would also add that I do find it incredibly frustrating that once again we're talking about the inappropriate, completely inappropriate behaviour of a Conservative Member of Parliament.
The High Court set to rule if the government must hand over to the COVID inquiry Boris Johnson's unredacted WhatsApp messages, notebooks and diaries. The Cabinet Office launched a legal challenge to Chairwoman Baroness Hallett's order, arguing many of the documents would be irrelevant. The decision's expected early this afternoon. Communities across England and Wales will see more police patrolling hotspot areas of antisocial behaviour. The move marks the next steps in delivering the Prime Minister's action plan to build stronger communities. Offenders will face tougher and swifter consequences, including being made to repair any damage they've caused.
And 4 British players are taking to the courts on day 4 of Wimbledon. It follows yesterday's disruption by Just Stop Oil protesters. Sir Andy Murray takes on Greek Stefanos Tsitsipas on centre court after fellow Brit Liam Brodie plays Norwegian Casper Ruud. Katie Boulter is also set to play. The British #1 said yesterday's interruption by Just Stop Oil was a shock to the system. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2714 and €1.1704. The price of gold is £1,509.45 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,348 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
And it's 10:40 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Right, a row over whether police officers can wear the union flag patches as a mark of respect to fallen colleagues has intensified after a chief constable said he would pay for his officers to wear the badges out of his own pocket.
It follows a move by the Metropolitan Police, who else, to ban its officers from wearing the patches while covering gay pride events in London at the weekend. The force said the badges were contentious, as similar stars and stripes emblems in the US have been hijacked by far-right and transphobic groups. So basically, they didn't want to offend the trans community. Where have we heard that before?
It's one of those days, isn't it, when you just feel like, am I the only person in the, you know, the only sane person in the room? Well, you, I don't mean you, Andrew, but I don't mean you, Mark White. But can you explain to us how these sorts of decisions happen?
Well, it's a commissioner who is clearly, he says, in his own words, determined to reform the Metropolitan Police, to get rid of what he says are bad cops. But what this particular decision by now Sir Mark Rowley, because he doubled down on that yesterday, means is that he's angered an awful lot of police officers in his own force. They say this has nothing to do with bad cops. It's a message, a badge, an emblem of respect. You could see for those watching on television, those listening on radio, it's effectively a union flag. It's grey in a black background with a thin blue line going across it, and it's respect for fallen officers, and the money goes to charity.
It's extraordinary that he's doubled down on this.
Yeah.
I mean, we know, we often criticise the police, don't we, Mark? But most of the time the police do a good job well, they're brave, they risk their lives, and we know some officers lose their lives in the line of duty, and this was a way of showing some sympathy, some respect for them and their families.
Yeah, well, certainly there is a real row here, not just amongst many of his own officers, but other chief constables, with the Northamptonshire chief constable coming out, tweeting last night that actually he would pay for this out of his own pocket. This is what Nick Arderley says. I have offered to pay for the patch for my officers and staff my own money if they wish to wear it, as I'm determined never to allow a minority to twist the meaning of this patch, which risks the memory of fallen officers being driven into an abyss of hushed tones. Well, as I say, completely at loggerheads with what the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, was saying. He spoke to the London Assembly and doubled down on the decision to ban these patches at the Pride at the weekend. This is what he told the Assembly.
I understand that officers care deeply and they want to show how they care about their colleagues, and that creates a bit of tension, and we're discussing it in the organisation. But the reason for taking a firm line is it just drips into officers having hundreds of badges, and then someone's policing something and someone's complaining. Think, well, we know you intended this by that one, but actually it also means that. And the reason this one is contentious, the equivalent in the States has ended up being both a policing symbol and has been used by some hard right groups. And so that's why this is a tricky territory.
Is absolutely
He's tying himself in knots there, really, isn't he?
He's pathetic.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm afraid.
It may well have been the Stars and Stripes badge, may have been hijacked by some groups in the States. That's not happened here in this country in any way, shape or form. This is an emblem that is designed as a mark of respect, as I say, for those officers who've fallen. Indeed, Bryn Hughes, who is the father of Nicola Hughes, who was shot dead along with her colleague Fiona Bone in 2012 in Manchester, has tweeted to offer his support to what Nick Arderley has tweeted, and said that, you know, that this is a campaign that they must win, that officers should be allowed to wear this patch.
If you go to the House of Commons, there's a plaque there for the fallen police officer Keith Palmer, who was killed by a knife-wielding terrorist as he was trying to protect Parliament. Why shouldn't police officers honour his loss?
Well, I mean, the thing as well about, in terms of, you could understand, policing is supposed to be without fear or favour. That's what the Commissioner's getting at, that, you know, we can't afford to take any sides or show support for any particular group, bar just a few which include the Poppy Appeal. But if you're going to include the Poppy Appeal and some other organisations, and indeed if you've got officers wearing the rainbow flag emblems while they are taking part in the Pride March, then you're doing just that. So what is wrong with an emblem like this that seems pretty innocuous it's quite low-key?
The police have got so many problems over the lack of respect for them, with women not respecting them and trusting them. They don't investigate burglaries. And he's banging on about this.
But
the most powerful copper in the country.
What he's basically saying is this picture is similar to a picture used in America which might offend a few people, so we're just not going to bother. We don't want to upset anybody. Well, what about the fallen police officers? They're more important in this than anybody at all. Mark, we've got to move on, which is just as well, because I think I'm about to have a clutcher at the idea that we're living in this kind of world. I'm sorry, Mark.
It is.
Thank you.
It's just mad
we will
and
keep
disproportionate.
Shining a light on that for the sake of common sense and our police force. Right. Local politics in Walsall has taken a nasty turn. A GBNews investigation has uncovered footage of 2 senior Labour councillors leading sectarian chanting and leafleting against a minority group in the West Midlands town. GBNews investigator Charlie Peters has this exclusive.
Zindabad, Zindabad. Zindabad, Zindabad.
Here's footage we've uncovered of 2 Labour councillors engaged in sectarian chanting in Walsall. That's Councillor Kazar Hussain, the deputy leader of the Labour group in the West Midlands town. He's chanting at a group of Ahmadi Muslims, a persecuted minority sect who regularly gather in Walsall to promote their faith.
Zindabad, Zindabad.
Mr. Hussain is chanting "Long live the finality of the Prophet" towards the Ahmadis, who believe in the possibility of future prophets. The leader of the Labour group, Aftab Nawaz, was also present at the incident. Both men have previously campaigned with Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer. When GB News approached the councillors, they referred to the Ahmadis as Qadiani, a pejorative slur against the persecuted group. They added that there was no link with any organisation that promotes violence or hatred, and that it would be inaccurate to suggest that the chants promoted any group or movement. But leaflets distributed at the tent standoff clearly show that they are promoted by the global Khatme Mubawat movement, a sectarian movement that campaigns against Ahmadi Muslims. GB News has seen copies of the leaflets, which say that the Ahmadis are liars and apostates, and praises those who fought against them. Earlier this year, Hussain called for greater diversity at Walsall Council, but despite this, he has engaged in chanting and leafleting described by this expert as sectarian and linked to foreign extremists.
To have elected Labour councillors chanting Khatme Mubawat in such close proximity to an Ahmadiyya Muslim faith store is seen to be, at the very least, sectarian and at the very worst, supportive of the Khatme Mubawat movement, a religious political movement in Pakistan that calls for the death of Ahmadis. It's absolutely abhorrent that persons elected to represent all would be involved in any way in sectarianism.
The chanting and rhetoric heard here in central Walsall reflects a worrying national trend of the persecution of Ahmadi Muslims, including the murder of a shopkeeper in Glasgow.
Asad Shah was stabbed to death by a Sunni Muslim from Bradford who harboured anti-Ahmadi views. His death was celebrated by members of the Khatme Mubawat movement. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community has told GB News that the incident was completely unacceptable and that it has been reported as a hate crime. West Midlands Police said that they had carried out inquiries, but no criminal offences had yet been identified. Charlie Peters, GB News, Walsall.
Right, stop talking, everybody. Carol Malone and Sam Lister are in the building.
Sorry, well, you're not talking to me, you're talking to Sam. I'm trying to get a word in.
Well, we have
that's unusual if you can't.
What we have just established is I was explaining to Sam Lister how Andrew Pearce managed to offend every Skoda driver out there when he was interviewing Swampy and said, "What, do you drive a Tesla?" And Swampy said, "No, I do not. I drive a Skoda." And Andrew said, "Aren't you embarrassed about that?" Tell us, Sam.
Well, the Lister family, who are probably watching, do drive a Skoda on you, so I think you need to apologise.
Piers, this is your chance to apologise.
The point I was making was, aren't you embarrassed that you're driving a gas-guzzling car?
So you pro-Skodas.
It didn't have to be a Skoda.
Piers,
it could have
that's
been
not what
anything.
you meant. You know that's not what you meant.
Malone, you know. What do I know about? What I know about a car, you could write in the back of a shrunken postage
crashed
stamp.
our best friend's car.
I do crash
Well,
my friend's
Mummy
car,
and Daddy
you told her.
Lister, don't be offended. That's
Mr.
not what
and Mrs.
Andrew meant. You
Lister.
clearly have excellent
Yes,
taste.
yes, but I'm glad I don't have one.
Right, shall we talk about the NHS, Carol? Record waiting list for treatments getting worse. Health Minister Maria Caulfield has admitted this yesterday. It's not really a shock to us, is it?
It's not a shock, and, you know, it is all the more shocking when today the same story running alongside that is these consultants who are on an average of 128 grand a year, most of them on double that with their private work, are now saying that they're going to make these strikes go on and on. The patients will just have to wait. Now, I find this astonishing, but what has upset me this week? We're hearing a lot of praise for the NHS, where everyone who's been held by it over the decades, over the years, is praising it, which is great, because they're praising the nurses and the doctors. But because of all that praise, because of all that adulation, we're not looking at the problems that actually affect the NHS. And there was a very interesting set of figures came out this week. What I was hearing, especially from the BMA, the medical union that's now gone totally militant, we're always hearing that they're being starved of cash from the government. It's tosh. OECD figures came out in your report, said that we have one of the best funded healthcare systems in the world. On the list of 36 countries, we're number 6 in terms of spend, in terms of percentage of GDP. So we spend 11.3% of our GDP on healthcare, which makes us one of the best funded healthcare systems in the world. The problem is it's mismanaged, the money is misdirected, not talking about the people on the cold face, not the doctors and the nurses. They're doing the best they can do with what they have. I'm talking about the suits who manage it, the suits on 6 figures who are mismanaging all this money. And because of this week's adulation for the NHS, because people are thanking them, we're not looking at the real problems that are besetting the NHS. It needs a total root and branch reform. I mean, these figures are, you know, incredible in terms of there are other countries that have a much smaller spend than ours, that are having much better results in terms of both, you know, in terms of funding and in terms of outcomes. We still have one of the worst cancer cure rates in Europe.
Sure.
We have people dying younger of heart disease, of cancers, and we're not addressing that. We keep on just saying everything's wonderful.
The strikes aren't helping, of course.
Well, the strikes are not helping. The strikes are what's taken these waiting lists to 7.4 million. So, you know, it was Steve Barclay yesterday who said, you know, we have an NHS to be proud of. How can he say that when 7.4 million people, every one of them in pain, every one of them
And you can't get through it. And if you try and ring your doctor's surgery, you're in the 8 o'clock queue for 45 minutes. And then you're cut off.
Yes,
it's funny though, isn't it, Sam? Because Carol's right about this sort of the deification that we've had of the NHS. You couldn't ever question that you changed the system. But even Sajid Javid had written a piece in one of the papers this week saying it's time for us to really commission a royal report, you know, commission. It's actually, they've said when they're going to do that. But will it just get kicked into the long grass again until after the next election?
Well, I think this point about the adulation and deification, I think we had this very strange scene yesterday. I don't know if you saw, but there was a service at Westminster Abbey, and you had the Health Secretary giving a prayer to the NHS.
I know.
mean, you had the Prime Minister and the Labour leader in the pulpit sermonising about the NHS. Now, when you treat it like a religion like that, it makes it hard to solve problems.
It was Nigel Lawson famously, when he was in Mrs Thatcher's cabinet, said the NHS is the closest thing we've got to a national religion. There was the evidence yesterday.
The actual demonstrations like yesterday. And when you treat it like that, it makes it very hard to then tackle the problems, because it becomes this, you know,
it becomes emotion.
It does, rather than a practical assessment of what is wrong with this service and how do we fix it? And I think, obviously, that the waiting list is a big part. It's one of the key pledges, one of the 5 pledges made by the Prime Minister that he will tackle during his premiership. But, they are admitting that this is not going to be an easy one to tackle.
And by deifying it, Sam, you know, by deifying the National Health and the way they are, all you're doing is giving these doctors now the excuse to say, well, if we're so damn good, give us the pay rise, give us the 35% pay rise, which can't ever happen. You know, it is very annoying. And I wish people would look at the things like the cancer survival rate. I think in Europe, ours is we have the worst 5-year survival rate in the 7 biggest cancers. I mean, that's shocking.
It is. Right, Sam, you're leader on the Express today. This is your story about the Lords trying to thwart the decisions of the people. What have you been writing about?
Yeah, so the illegal migration bill, that's the bill that's going to allow the government to swiftly deport people who arrive in the country illegally. So anybody on the small boats, regardless of what their asylum, claim is, they will be able to deport those people because they've arrived here illegally. Now, it's hit so much obstruction in the House of Lords.
20 defeats this week alone.
A record 20 defeats.
Shocking.
Unbelievable. And actually, yesterday was quite interesting because it was the Archbishop again.
Oh, God, well be.
Yeah, but what was quite telling, I thought, was Lord Lilly, Peter Lilly.
Yeah.
He stood up and he said to the Archbishop, "You've come up with this," because he'd written a letter to the Times yesterday saying we need to be more compassionate. Right. He said, "You've come up with this again, but you've got a policy for a policy. You haven't got a plan."
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, Sam. We've just got some breaking news we need to bring you. Police are responding to an incident where a car has crashed into a primary school in south-west London. There are reports of several injuries. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, joins us now for the latest on this story. Mark?
Yeah, this is an incident that unfolded just under an hour ago at Camp Road in Wimbledon, a primary school there. All three of the emergency services are attending. The Metropolitan Police have just put out a very brief statement about what they know so far. I'll just read that to you. Officers, they say, are responding to an incident at a primary school in Camp Road in Wimbledon. They said we were called at 9:54 to reports that a car collided with a building at the school. Several people, it says, are being treated at the scene. We'll share further updates. London Fire Brigade have also just tweeted to say that they are responding to this incident as well. Still, as I say, just an hour or so after this incident happened, the very early stages of what is a full emergency response, and we are awaiting word really on just how badly injured those individuals are, whether they are actually people that were in the car or whether they may be some of the primary school pupils. We don't know that. We just know that this car, described by some as a Land Rover, struck this building. It's near a golf course next to the primary school as well, and not just on the fringes of Wimbledon Common itself. Of course, any time any incident like this happens, there is a great deal of concern, but no suggestion as yet that this is a security issue. But as I say, more details coming in. We'll bring them to you as soon as we get them.
All right, that's Mark
Thank
White,
you,
our
Mark.
Home and Security Editor. We'll keep you up to date on that as soon as we get any more news on that breaking news. Just Carol, what you were saying, because the time it happened an hour
Because
ago.
of the time, if it was an hour ago, that's going to make it sort of after 9:30. So hopefully a lot of the kids are going to already be in class. So hopefully no children are affected, but it might affect passers-by. But it could be just somebody having passing out at the wheel, having a heart attack or whatever. You always immediately think terrorist, don't you? And we've been conditioned to think that. Hopefully to God, it's not that.
Yes,
a few injuries.
A lot of kids are still at school. Actually, mine broke up already yesterday when I was reading that. South-West London. That's where my children go to school. I had a moment. But as a parent, Sam, it's your worst nightmare, isn't it? You send your kids to school and then something happens like this.
It's just awful. I mean, the poor parents. I hope the school's already been out and spoken to all the parents, because obviously that when you hear this kind of stuff on the news, I'm sure there will be a lot of concern of people who go there.
Yeah.
I hope they've been out there and spoken to the parents quickly.
All right, well, you'll be back with us in a bit. It's 11 o'clock now on Thursday, the 6th of July. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So still to come this morning, another major event, another 2 Just Stop Oil disruptions yesterday at Wimbledon. When are the authorities going to finally act and toughen up with these protesters? We're going to be joined by one of them shortly.
And the former government whip Chris Pincher, he's facing an 8-week suspension over groping allegations at the Carlton Club. This could mean yet another by-election, and Rishi Sunak is already miles behind in the polls.
Let us know what you think about all of our stories this morning. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, here is your morning news with Rihanna.
Thank you, Bev. Good morning. It is coming up to 11 o'clock. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. And we start with that breaking story. Several people have been injured at a primary school in Wimbledon in southwest London. The Met Police says officers were called to reports a car had crashed into a school building in Camp Road just before 10 this morning. Several people are understood to be treated at the scene. London Fire Brigade says it's also at the scene, and we'll bring you more on that developing story as we get it. The Standards Committee has recommended that former government whip Chris Pincher be suspended for 8 weeks. Mr Pincher is accused of drunkenly assaulting 2 men at London's Carlton Club. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson told GBNews the suspension could lead to a by-election.
Suspension of that length is a very serious sanction, and I think the expectation is that that would then now lead to a by-election. The length of that suspension is very serious. I would also add that I do find it incredibly frustrating that once again we're talking about the inappropriate, completely inappropriate behaviour of a Conservative Member of Parliament.
The High Court set to rule if the government must hand over to the COVID inquiry Boris Johnson's unredacted WhatsApp messages, notebooks and diaries. The Cabinet Office launched a legal challenge to Chairwoman Baroness Hallett's order, arguing many of the documents would be irrelevant. A decision's expected early this afternoon. The former Prime Minister's backing Lady Hallett, having made the material available in late May. The Health Secretary is meeting a range of experts today in a bid to cut NHS waiting lists and improve patient care. The NHS Recovery Summit will be attended by ministers, clinical leaders and senior executives. They'll consider how new technology such as AI could be used to transform care and improve access to services. It comes after Health Minister Maria Caulfield admitted waiting lists in England are set to increase. The financial watchdog continues talks with bank chiefs over concerns they're failing to pass on the rise in interest rates to savers. Officials from the Financial Conduct Authority are meeting with bosses from HSBC, NatWest, Lloyds and Barclays. They'll ask why savers' interest rates are lagging behind the cost of mortgages. Recent data shows the average savings rate stands at 2.48%. The average 2- and 5-year fixed mortgage rate recently passed 6%. Communities across England and Wales will see more police patrolling hotspot areas of antisocial behaviour. The move marks the next steps in delivering the Prime Minister's action plan to build stronger communities. Offenders will face tougher and swifter consequences, including being made to repair any damage they've caused. Home Secretary Suella Braverman says antisocial behaviour causes misery to many.
More visible, integrated, responsive policing in communities, responding to issues like vandalism, like graffiti, like gangs loitering and congregating in a hostile and aggressive way.
Police forces across Britain have carried out the largest ever crackdown on cannabis farms, raiding more than 1,000 facilities. During the month-long Operation Mile, 200,000 plants were seized, worth £130 million. 1,000 suspects were arrested. The raids involved every police force in England, Wales and Scotland. And more than 10 million people, including a spate of celebrities, have already signed up for Meta's new app, Threads. The Twitter rival, which is linked to Instagram, went live in the UK at midnight last night. Users can post up to 5 minutes worth of video and 500 characters of text. Celebrities who've already created profiles include Gordon Ramsay, Shakira and Lad Baby. 4 British players are taken to the courts on day 4 of Wimbledon. It follows yesterday's disruption by Just Stop Oil protesters. Sir Andy Murray takes on Greek Stefanos Tsitsipas on centre court after fellow Brit Liam Brodie plays Norwegian Casper Ruud. Katie Bolt is also set to play. The British #1 says yesterday's interruption by Just Stop Oil was a shock to the system. Crime Minister Chris Philp says the government's urged organisers to beef up security. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back over to Andrew and Beth.
Welcome back. Now, police are responding to an incident. It's breaking news where a car has crashed into a primary school in southwest London. Several people are being treated, police have said. Fire crews are also at the scene of the incident. Mark White joins us now with the latest. Now, fingers crossed, this school might have already broken up for summer. We just don't know.
Yes, so we're trying to establish just exactly what the term times are. No indication as yet that any school pupils are involved in this. It's been described, though, as a serious incident. It's all three emergency services that are attending. The Metropolitan Police put out a statement saying that we were called at 9:54 in the morning to reports that a car had collided with a building at the school in Camp Road in Wimbledon, and it says several people are being treated at the scene, and of course that they'll give further updates.
5 to 10 they were called. As Karen Malone was saying earlier, the kids would have been in school. If it is open still, the school, the kids would have already been in classrooms, so that's some consolation. Do we have any indication, Mark, about how seriously injured the people are?
No, we don't. But an indication, I think, from the London Fire Brigade in that they've sent fire appliances, normal fire appliances, but also 2 specialist rescue tenders.
That's to cut people out of the...
Yes, absolutely.
It's a Land Rover.
So they will attend all the major incidents where there are people who are trapped, and extricating them from that situation is particularly difficult. So these are highly trained specialist rescue units that can get people out of the most precarious of situations. So an indication, I think, that there are probably people trapped. Now, yes, if the school is in term, pupils would have been in the school, but we're told this vehicle collided with the school building.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that no school pupils were caught up in this. If indeed, as you say, they were actually attending, and you know it wasn't actually during the school break. But this kind of information will come through in the minutes and hours ahead. Clearly, there will be many parents that are worried out there. Police are just describing it at the moment as a serious incident which involves a collision with a building at the school. No more detail than that.
Because we always think, don't we, oh God, is it terrorism? Because that is often a method they use, vans, lorries, to drive into people.
Yeah, I mean, any time that kind of report comes through, of course, there is always concern about this potentially being a deliberate act. I think the thing to add there, just to try, if we can, to reassure people, is the vast majority of vehicles colliding with people or buildings are as a result of accidents and not a deliberate act. So, of course, it's noteworthy because it's collided with a school building, and there's obvious concern because of that. But no indications that we're getting at this stage, anyway, that there is anything untoward. So we just wait. What we are in the process of at the moment is a full-scale emergency response to deal with the casualties. Clearly, we will get more of an indication. And if there is a security concern, that kind of detail will come out relatively quickly, I would imagine.
Of course, coincidentally, Wimbledon tennis tournament is occurring just around the corner from this location at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's an added concern. This is just on the fringes of Wimbledon Common as well, so and next to a local golf course. So there's always, given this massive major sporting event that's subject to very significant security around it, there is always concern about the potential for anything happening near that event itself. We know, of course, that Just Stop Oil launched 2 protests at Wimbledon. So security is uppermost in the minds of those who are trusted with guarding that particular venue. But again, we must stress, no indication that this is in any way linked to the Wimbledon sporting tournament, other than just geographically, and the fact that, of course, also, it's a live, ongoing incident being attended by all 3 emergency services.
Has there ever been a protest, in your recollection, Mark, captured live on television where somebody throws a jigsaw pieces all over a tennis lawn and runs around somebody in his 60s who you think might know a little better at that age?
Yeah, I mean, well, perhaps, you know, while still trying to achieve what is their fundamental aim here, of course, which is
infuriating
to get as much publicity as possible. They don't want to totally alienate themselves with every member of the public by pouring the likes of paint on it. At least you can pick up a jigsaw relatively quickly, hopefully, as they seem to have been able to do on two occasions.
But I guess
again, we should just reiterate, as we're talking about this incident with the school, we don't want to make a link to Just Stop Oil, because, as you know, this, as far as we know, has nothing to do with that, nor would that be the kind of tactic they would ever indulge in anyway.
And I think it was a jigsaw because they bought it once they'd got inside.
It was a jigsaw of Wimbledon tennis court, apparently.
Marvellous.
They're complete idiots.
Right, thank you, Mark. Well,
another expression for them, idiots.
Bring us the latest as you hear about the situation in Wimbledon, won't you?
Now, some more breaking news reaching us now. The transgender rights group's Mermaid has lost its case to have the gay rights organisation LGB Alliance stripped of its charitable status in what's been described as an unprecedented case.
Earlier on GB News, Andrew Doyle spoke to Bev Jackson and Kate Harris of the LGB Alliance group, and here's what they had to say.
Doyle for GB News. I'm here with Bev Jackson and Kate Harris in their first interview since the decision. Mermaids lost their case against LGB Alliance. Bev and Kate, how are you feeling about this?
Deliriously happy. It's a massive day for us. Huge win, not just for LGB Alliance, but for gays, lesbians, bisexuals all around the world. We couldn't be happier, and it's all thanks to the loyalty of many, many, many thousands and thousands of supporters from all around the world.
But that does make us think that why on earth was this necessary? How could this happen, that we find ourselves in court having to defend, for instance, what a lesbian is, when everybody knows what a lesbian is? It is extraordinary, all the money we've spent, £250,000, in order to defend our existence as the only charity that stands up exclusively for people who are attracted to others of the same sex. How is it possible?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Andrew, that this was not a case of our choice. This case was forced upon us by Mermaids and Stonewall, several other groups, although it's true that Stonewall pulled out very early on in the project. But this was just a totally unnecessary vanity project to put across their view that there is only one point of view allowed in the United Kingdom on issues of sex and gender. Now, that's directly contradicting the foundations of a civilised society. So we think this is a victory for everybody in the UK, because it just underlines, and when you see the judgment, you will see quite a lot of detail on this, that freedom of thought, freedom of expression underlines what the very nature of a civilised society, and that's what we want, a civilised society where everybody can be allowed and welcome to say what they think and what's important.
Yeah, and as a charity, one of our important charitable objects, the main charitable object, is to prevent discrimination, to work against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. And, you know, we have to remember 69 countries around the world still criminalise homosexuality. We need to step up, as we have stepped up, for instance, in donating to Pride in Uganda, and also then there's the new homophobia, in which we hear that children at school who are attracted to others, lesbians, are being told, oh, maybe you're a boy. Yeah. This is the new homophobia, so we have to fight the traditional homophobia and the new homophobia at the same time, and that's what we are doing, and we will carry on doing that.
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting things about the judgment was the discussion on plurality of views. And the judgment says, it's very interesting, that LGB Alliance was determined to put their view across before they were a charity and since they were a charity. And there is no link whatsoever between any damage to Mermaids and, of course, to any others who subscribe to their views. All we did was say, everybody should be able to say what they like in society on issues of sex and gender. And we know we know the fight continues, but today we're celebrating. It's just a marvellous day for every single person who supports freedom of speech.
And so you should be celebrating. Bev Jackson
Terrific,
and Kate Harris of the Lesbian, Gay and Bisexual Alliance Group.
I've known those women for a long time, and they've had so much grief setting up this group. So they simply didn't want to be called LGBT because they don't want the transsexuals with them, because they take the view that children being taught that they can have a different gender from the one they were assigned at birth is a lie. That's their view.
And also homophobic.
Yeah.
In many ways, because it's saying that it's not OK to be gay. If you are attracted to somebody of the same sex, then you must be a different gender.
Yeah, and they've had great difficulty with being recognised, but a lot of Labour MPs have called that group wicked.
That's
and it's
awful.
not wicked, because I support it, and I think those women are brave, and we salute them.
Absolutely. Well, joining us now this morning is Miranda Yardley, a human rights activist. Good morning, Miranda. Your reaction, please, to this conclusion that actually the LGB Alliance can have their charitable status, and that's OK.
Yeah, I think it's a great decision. It was only the right thing to do, given that we live in a pluralistic democracy. I think it's very important. I'd like to underline as well that the central issue with LGB Alliance is that that sex matters. There are instances where our biological sex matters. It's not gender, it's same-sex attraction. The problem that's happening with schools is that children are being told that their bodies are wrong for their personalities, which is the cruelest thing that I think that you could ever say to a child. And I think it's important that we can have this discussion and this debate openly, and that organisations can challenge what groups like Mermaids are doing.
Yeah, Miranda, I think a lot of people watching this programme and listening to will be thinking, how is it so often, virtually every day, they read something or they hear something on the radio, watch something on television, where there's a row over people not giving enough, I don't know if respect's the right word, but it's to do with the trans community's rights, when people think it's a very tiny part of the population, and yet it seems we spend disproportionate amounts of time talking about the issue.
I don't know if it's disproportionate. I think it's the defining social issue of the day.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
It's certainly got. Well, it's certainly got a lot of reach, and if you look at the focus of groups which are historically have been involved in supporting the rights of lesbians and gay men for rights such as being able to marry and to being able to inherit property and being treated fairly in the law for things like benefits and pensions and whatnot, all the focus of this has gone on to transgender, and the whole idea of transgender is basically any useful idiot can be transgender. All you have to say is that your gender is different to the gender that was assigned at birth, which itself is an empty, undefinable statement. What I'm saying here is that sex matters. It's very important. We need to put that on the table and not run away with these ideas that social stereotypes define us as people, and certainly don't define what our children are.
The pressure from the trans activists is immense, Miranda. They exert power behind the scenes at all sorts of organisations. And we just saw a clip earlier of Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Police Commissioner, accepting that police officers won't wear the thin blue line union flag on their uniforms because the trans lobby see that as offensive because it is slightly like a similar flag in America, which does have negative connotations to trans. When you hear stories like that, do you wonder how we've got to that position?
Well, absolutely everything is transphobic. The whole thing about transgender is that it's become a very, very useful tool. The organisations that are putting their support behind this are doing this not because they believe sincerely in what they're saying. You ask any of them to define transgender, they're all at sea. It literally means anything. They don't really support these rights. What they're doing is it's become this latest fashionable thing that you can put your money behind and put your virtue signalling behind to show how pure you are and how right on you are.
Yeah.
The whole idea is just a marketing exercise. It's a marketing exercise by large corporations, and there's loads of money involved in it.
There is money.
The whole thing behind Stonewall is that Stonewall lost their raison d'etre when the right for equal marriage was won in 2014. So they needed another market to break into. So cynically, they do 180 on gay rights and campaign for a ideological viewpoint that says people are defined by their behaviour rather than anything else.
And of course, in America,
rather than reaching the natural conclusion that being a male or a female shouldn't define you entirely as a person, what they're saying is that what people do is connected to to what sex they are, and we have this completely evidence-free idea that children can be medicalized as if they were the opposite sex, and everything's going to be fine and dandy when they grow up.
Yeah. There's obviously, in America, Miranda, the trans industry is worth billions of pounds. There are new hospitals being built almost every month in America now to just to facilitate gender reassignment operations, often on younger people. And of course, those patients at that time, they become a lifetime subscriber to the pharmaceutical industry. Do you feel like this topic is an individual children's lives are hijacked sometimes by profit-making machinery without enough people to stop and say, hang on, is this the right decision?
Well, if you look at the situation in America, well, first thing is I can't speak for that. I haven't seen that particularly that there are hospitals springing up particularly to do these types of operations. But what I would say is that you'll notice that the political action for a lot of this is coming from colleges and universities. And if you look at colleges and universities in the USA and you look at healthcare in the USA, both of these are commodities. They're commodified in a way that they aren't in this country. It's a very, very different situation. And there is there's a long-standing tactic of the trans lobby to adopt the language and the tactics of the Black Civil Rights Movement, which they keep doing, meaning that there is there's a equivocation in their minds that there is this idea that to not view trans people as their self-defined gender is actually an act of racism. Even Stonewall have called it, when it comes to dating preferences, Stonewall have called it sexual apartheid, which is an absolutely bizarre statement from a lesbian and gay rights movement. Yeah.
All right, Miranda.
Really interesting to talk to you.
That's Miranda Yardley. Really good to talk to you.
Thank you.
And,
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on.
Right.
Lots of views coming in.
We're going to be talking to a Just Stop Oil protester in a moment to justify what they did yesterday. I'll read out some of your tweets and messages to them, emails. David has said, why not protest for Stop Plastic? I think more people would be on board with that, David. And Joy says, why do the companies affected take out why do the companies affected take out private prosecutions against these protesters to recoup the cost of their actions? I think Joe means why don't they?
And a lot of people get very upset about the views of Sir Mark Rowley, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, doubling down on that ban on police officers wearing a badge which is meant to honour the fallen police officers. Steve says, I'm a retired police officer. I'm disgusted at Mark Rowley's ban on that badge. What next? Ban poppies is a disgrace. And Joy says, please encourage a manufacturer to make thin blue line badges we could all wear. I'd wear one too, Joy.
Yeah, I would. I think that's a great idea. Mary says the government needs to do something pretty quickly because if they hit any cycling events in the UK or like the Tour de France in France, they could end up killing somebody or seriously injuring the racers at the speeds they go. Quite right, Mary. It makes you feel that every event is vulnerable, isn't it? And we are going to be talking, as I say, to somebody from Just Stop Oil after this very quick break. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News. First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain.
Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 11:27 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Now, just a few moments ago, Labour leader Keir Starmer's speech on education in Kent was interrupted by Green New Deal protesters. Who are this lot? Let's have a look at what happened.
Done that one. Will you just...
Which side are the Labour Party on?
We are on the side of economic growth. Will you just let me please get on with this? Thank you very much. We have already... Will you just let me...
Oh, that actually made it onto the stage
and
behind
you know, that's
him.
interesting because when he made his first big speech at the Labour Party conference, there were hecklers, but I almost thought they were scripted because his responses were very good and they were prepared for it. That was a typical flat-footed response from Starmer. But that's because he's U-turned on a £28 billion Green Deal, because he U-turns every week.
Well, let's speak now to another Just Stop Oil activist, Alex de Koning, who joins us. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, you haven't convinced Keir Starmer, have you? And he's the Labour leader.
Well, he has actually adopted the demand of no new oil and gas and coal. So we have convinced him in this regard, but he has backpedaled very sadly on his £28 billion a year green pledges. So obviously we need to still keep his feet on the fire.
He's also criticised your tactics, which I think most people in the country would agree with, are disruptive, unpopular and counterproductive, Alex.
I mean, doing disruption for disruption's sake is obviously terrible, and there's no excuse for that. But this is not disruption for disruption's sake. We're trying to raise the fire alarm. And when you hear the fire alarm, you shouldn't just stay in the building and debate about tactics. You should get out the building, call the fire brigade, stop pouring oil on the flames and find a fire extinguisher. Don't you agree?
OK, how long have we got, Alex? I mean, literally, how long do we have until the planet is unrecognisable? How urgent is this?
It's a really good question. It's not as simple as that. It's not going to be like a light switch that turns off and suddenly
but things are already getting so much worse. I mean, have you seen in New York, the smoke? People couldn't leave their house because they couldn't breathe. 10 million people couldn't leave their house because they couldn't breathe because of wildfires in Canada. 33 million people in Pakistan last year had their lives completely decimated by floods. Their houses, their pets, their wedding photos washed away in one go. The same with the floods in northern Italy, same with the 40-degree heat wave here, where 1,700 people died in 2 days.
What here?
People died.
Did you say?
Yes, last summer in 40 degrees.
How many people did you say died? We just had a few sound issues there. In the UK, you're attributing how many deaths to climate change over a couple of days?
During our 40-degree heat wave last summer, 1,700 people died.
Where did you get that figure from?
Well,
where did you get that figure from?
Widely reported, and I think
where
it's
did
even
you
from the
get it
government's
from?
own
Widely
report.
reported. What respected body did you get that figure from?
I think that's from the government's own reports, but if we want to talk about this, the UN...
Alex, sorry, you can't come on and say, I think. You're making a very serious claim. You have to tell us where you get that information from. So let's try again.
UN,
where did you get it from?
The UN has said that 4 million people have died as a result.
No, we're talking about what you said about Britain. You said 1,400 and so died over 2 days. So where did you get that?
All right, if you want to play that game, let me Google it. I'll find it in 2 seconds.
We haven't got time for you to Google it, but just explain to me, Alex. But just explain. So those people, those British people, you're saying dropped dead because our climate emergency is such. What do they die from? What did they actually die from that was related to the heat in 2 days?
So that figure was from the World Health Organization, which I hope you can agree is a respected body.
I don't actually.
They died.
I don't. I think the World Health Organization has absolutely baked in profit motives and control motives to want us to believe all of this. But but we all want British people to live a good, healthy life. We don't want 1,700 people dropping dead over 2 days.
Where did they get it from?
How did climate kill these people?
Okay, so there's a variety of different factors, right? In this case, it was because of the extreme heats. People died from heat stroke. When the temperature gets hot enough, for example, when it gets so hot that the sweat no longer cools you down, you literally boil in your own sweat. I know that sounds like complete exaggeration.
It does actually.
When it gets...
I'm afraid it does sound like exaggeration. I've never heard of anybody boiling
exaggeration to say that people die in fires.
I've never heard of anybody boiling in their own sweat. What, boiling to death?
If there's a wildfire, people die from it. If there's a flood, people die from it. If there's a hurricane, people die.
How long do you have to boil for before you die?
This shouldn't be so funny. Listen, what we're finding...
People are dying and you're literally laughing.
Well, because you're making silly claims. Boiling to death.
Listen, claims to say that the climate crisis causes wildfires.
If there are elderly people who might be vulnerable in the very, very hot weather, and I agree with you on that, then those care homes, the hospitals might be looking after those people, have a responsibility to keep those people cool and to provide air conditioning.
Do you think you boil to death as long as you boil an egg?
But
I'm sorry, Alex. I think you're bringing. I think you need to. If you don't mind me saying, Alex, I think you need to grow up a bit actually, because this is ridiculous.
Oh, really?
Alex,
okay. Well, I appreciate your opinion, but literally 10 million people could not leave their home in New York for several days,
and now people are boiling to death in their sweat. They're boiling to death. Perhaps they should put more deodorant on.
Alex, I can't. I'm sorry. I'm trying to have a grown-up conversation with you. The impact of Just Stop Oil protests is that you are alienating. This is the thing. We find you kind of hilarious. When a man goes onto the court at Wimbledon and throws a jigsaw around, it doesn't make us buy into your perhaps well-intentioned ambition to save the planet. You're losing the room, mate.
It's not an opinion to say that the climate crisis is killing people. I can't believe I'm having this conversation.
Alex, why a jigsaw? I don't think I've ever seen a jigsaw gaily distributed around a tennis lawn in a high-profile climate change protest captured on TV. What a waste of a jigsaw. It was a waste of a jigsaw.
Do you at least agree that when there are wildfires and there's floods and there's droughts, it's harder to grow crops? That means we're going to have more food insecurity.
In case I boil to death in my sweat. Alex, we're going to have to let you go because we're running late to the headlines. Alex, thanks for coming.
You're laughing.
We've got to go to the news. Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. It's just gone 11:34. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Several people have been injured at a primary school in Wimbledon in southwest London. Merton Police says officers were called just before 10 this morning to reports a car had crashed into a building at the Study Preparatory School in Camp Road. Several people are being treated at the scene. The London Fire Brigade says it's also there, as well as London's Air Ambulance. The Standards Committee has recommended that former Government Whip Chris Pincher be suspended for 8 weeks. Mr Pincher is accused of drunkenly assaulting 2 men at London's Carlton Club. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson told GB News the suspension could lead to a by-election.
Suspension of that length is a very serious sanction, and I think the expectation is that that would then now lead to a by-election. The length of that suspension is very serious. I would also add that I do find it incredibly frustrating that once again we're talking about the inappropriate, completely inappropriate behaviour of a Conservative Member of Parliament.
Will you just...
Which side are the Labour Party on?
We are on the side of economic growth. Will you just let me please get on with this? Thank you very much.
Sir Keir Starmer's speech outlining Labour's education reform plans has been interrupted by protesters urging him to stop making U-turns on climate policies. The Labour leader was announcing his goal for 500,000 more children to reach their early learning targets by 2030. The proposal includes hiring 6,500 more teachers and prioritising language skills. Communities across England and Wales will see more police patrolling hotspot areas of antisocial behaviour. The move marks the next steps in delivering the Prime Minister's action plan to build stronger communities. Offenders will face tougher and swifter consequences, including being made to repair any damage they've caused. And 4 British players are taking to the courts on day 4 of Wimbledon. It follows yesterday's disruption by Just Stop Oil protesters. So Andy Murray takes on Greek Stefanos Tsitsipas on centre court after fellow Brit Liam Brodie plays Norwegian Casper Rudd. Katie Bolt is also set to play. The British #1 said yesterday's interruption by Just Stop Oil was a shock to the system. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2735 and €1.1721. The price of gold is £1,506.21 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,346 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Now by our national reporter Paul Hawkins, who is live from Cardiff. Paul, I remember you being there at the time of this accident. How is the mood there today? It was actually quite angry, wasn't it, a few weeks ago?
Yeah, and I think that anger is still there. There's an extremely low level of trust between the police and the local community and the family and the friends of the two boys. But in fact, that level of trust so low, in fact, that Cardiff City Council are helping to organise the arrangements for the funeral, the kind of surrounding area, cordoning off roads, etc., because there is an ongoing IOPC investigation. That's the Independent Office for Police Conduct into the two officers, the behaviour of the two officers who were in that van that was following the boys on that bike. We found out later on was a birthday present that was given to them. But that's kind of being parked to one side for the moment. Today is about the two boys and remembering their lives, and that is why on every lamppost lining Grand Avenue in Ely here in Cardiff there are blue ribbons. Blue, of course, the colour of the balloons that were released during that candlelit vigil that took place just a few days after the boys' deaths. And at the moment, plans still happening. Of course, there would be a bus in the way just at the moment, but behind it there's a van, and they've just erected a screen in the background in front of the church where the ceremony will take place at 1 p.m, which I assume will be broadcasting the event live to the thousands of people that are expected to line Grand Avenue and throughout Ely. Buses are on diversion throughout the day, and also schools are closed. They're expecting thousands of people here, and the friends of the family as well. They've organised quite a procession towards the church beforehand. There will be hundreds and hundreds of motorbikes, 4 hearses, 2 limousines, 8 Rolls Royces, and Ely will grind to a halt as a minute's silence is observed during the ceremony, which starts at 1 p.m. There'll then be a wake later on, and then the two boys, who are known to be inseparable since nursery, they will be buried together in the same plot of land in Western Ceremony, which is about a mile away from here.
Right, thank you, Paul. Very sad day. Now, Joining us to go through the stories is Carol Malone and Sam Lister. We're still giggling. I'm sorry. Did you see our Just Stop Oil interaction,
I saw you
Carol?
laughing at him. I couldn't listen to it, actually.
He came
was
out
really
with
annoying.
the extraordinary assertion that some old people last summer boiled to death in their sweat because of the effects of global warming.
And where was that?
Some 1,700 over 2 days.
Yeah,
and where was that?
evidence?
Fact? Where was that reported?
Well, he didn't know.
He didn't know that. No.
Well,
and then but I also pointed out that I thought, what a waste of a jigsaw. That silly old Just Stop Oil protester.
Do you know?
Common yesterday looked a very nice jigsaw.
It wasn't necessarily our most professional broadcasting moment, was it?
We shouldn't have laughed
you were
our heads
bent double
off.
on the table.
I was bent double on the table.
You would,
but let me tell you, out there in Twitterland, you were on side with us. You were doubled over laughing because this is the problem, isn't it, Carol? With these protesters, we end up, they're just so bad. They're just becoming a parody of themselves. They're just hilarious throwing a jigsaw over Wimbledon.
When you see them at Wimbledon, I don't think about oil and pollution and the climate anymore. All I think is irritating little,
yes, quite right.
you know what. and I'm not. They don't make me think about the climate. They make me go the opposite way.
Exactly.
I get so angry about it. But when I see people like him, you know, who's like 12, and has no backup for what he's actually saying, has no facts for what, you know, no statistics for what he's saying. I mean, how can he say people died in their own sweat? And yet he's
they
not,
boiled to death in their own sweat.
In their own sweat. I mean, it's just beyond.
I asked him if you had to boil it for as long as an egg.
We shouldn't be laughing.
But you know what? I mean, look, I'm going to try now just for a moment to drown in the milk of human kindness, Sam, and just to say that we should admire passion in young people. We should admire them wanting to be politically engaged in something. But they are losing the room every day, this lot.
And they've even lost the room with Keir Starmer. He's disassociated himself this morning, even though he's taken millions from Just Stop Oil, at least $1 million from Just Stop Oil. He's been out today saying, you know, he wants them to stop doing what they're doing. So, you know,
it would be better if we...
They're not winning over. They're not persuading anybody, are they?
And it would be better if, you know, if we want to admire young people, let's admire them for their accuracy. Let's admire them for their knowledge.
Yeah, do your research, mate.
Yes,
that's what we said. But also, the bloke at Wimbledon, he looked like somebody's grandpa. He looked about 70 years old.
Much the same age.
Yeah, I mean,
you think they'd know better, really?
Exactly, Carol.
Seriously.
You do know, though. So I have.
Look at him.
But you know what? I have a friend of a friend who has got embroiled within Just Stop Oil.
Look at that poor old.
That poor jigsaw. And,
is it a jigsaw?
And
that's a jigsaw. He bought it there.
But this friend of mine, she was saying that this person she knew that got into Just Stop Oil, she said, I promise you, it's a cult.
Yeah.
This woman was mildly interested in environmental issues. She put one toe inside that and she said, I'm sure there are some bad actors in there, some, I don't know, false flag, who knows, who are whipping them up and whipping them up and whipping them up so that they get brainwashed into doing more and more extreme and disruptive behaviours.
Anyway. It's a bit like... they're giving themselves a kind of sense of purpose, aren't they? They think it's like moral indignation.
Yes, and how dare we not share their passion and conviction because we're immoral. It's like the Archbishop of Canterbury. How dare he, with all his religious backgrounds, imply that if you support the Rwanda boats policy, you're not Christian.
But there was a very interesting report that talked about protesters, and particularly the Just Stop Oil ones, and it says if you look at them all, they all suffer, they're all afflicted by narcissism. They actually love themselves, and they think they're going to make the world love them if they're promoting this cause, and of course we're doing the absolute opposite.
And they have an easy life. They don't really have any genuine challenges and struggles in life.
Not at all.
So they go for this. Carol, let's talk about rail firms saying they're going to close the ticket offices. We touched on this yesterday. It's moved on today because the disabled organisations are also now calling
and
for...
the timing of it, Carol, when they're still on strike.
No, it's true. This is going to hit the elderly and the disabled more than anything. I was reading today there's something like 1,766 stations around the country. Half of those don't have a ticket office. Not half. 700 and odd don't have a ticket office. Another 700 have them on at part-time. So that means if you're elderly and you don't have a smartphone, it means you can't use the railways anymore. It means you can't travel on trains. It's hard enough for the elderly to get around now, but this is going to make it even worse.
And the other thing is, Carol, they have these machines, but you need a degree in computer science.
I mean, I don't know why I'm asking you, because you wouldn't be able to work a simple one.
A degree in computer science to operate them. They are so complicated.
I'm going to be the one who goes against this now, because I actually think only 1 in 10 tickets is now sold through a ticket office.
Can I just say, no, I'm just going to knock that fact right down there, because while that's true, that is still 118 million tickets sold a year, which is quite a lot of money.
This is true, but of those, 99% can be bought at those ticket machines.
Yes, if you can work it, the machine.
If you can work it. But what I would say is, I think you can't leave businesses, it's essentially a business, you can't leave businesses to operate in a kind of 1980s, 1990s fashion. The world has moved on and people have adapted. And we can't have ticket offices where there's just a woman sat there all day waiting for somebody to come in.
It's not just about tickets, it's about information. I mean, it happened to me recently. The first time I've been on a train for as long as I can remember, I was going to Newcastle. And we'd messed up with buying it. We had to go and talk to people. There was people there to talk to, which was good.
The point of this reform is that it's, instead of sitting behind a desk, you still have the staff there. They're just wondering about the
please. Yeah, you find one of them.
Sam, but here's the real point, because I use trains a lot. You go to the ticket office, they will get you the cheapest ticket. And there was one example when we were going to Norfolk. I went to ticket. The ticket was in a phenomenal amount of money, about 140, 150 quid. Went to the ticket office, got it for £74.
But does it matter if that
you're being
person
ripped
is
off
sat?
by those machines.
Does it matter if that person's sat behind a desk or if they're just on the station concourse? Doing more than one thing.
Do you really think we'd find one on the concourse? Seriously.
They'll be having a cup of tea.
So supermarkets got a whole load of people off the tills, put in the self-service. Can you find a supermarket worker? No, you can't.
No, you can't. You're right.
And
but I think that,
it's not as if we're not paying enough for these train tickets already.
Paying
that they
I
should
mean, I'm on
offer
them.
that additional
Yeah.
They're the most expensive train tickets in Europe by a country mile.
But they're going to stay high if we're paying for services that most people don't use.
But this is going to provoke the union into even more strikes.
Well, it doesn't take much, does it, to let's be honest? But, essentially, the part of the problem is, with the strikes at the moment, they don't want to adopt new working practices.
No.
Some of those practices are 100 years old. This is part of the problem. The rail network is not sustainable when we're living in the kind of past.
No, it's true, but you also have to have employees on hand to give advice as well. And the ticket office was always the place you go to, not just for tickets, but for advice as well. Saying, how do I get to here? How do I go there? I mean, I'm always... I don't know how to get to places, and I have to find a human being to say, help me, even on the tube.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
You never go on the tube.
Well, on the rare occasion I do. Yes. And neither do you.
I use the tube I use the tube all the time.
Actually, you do, actually.
But I'm just saying, about those dated working practices, one thing that Mick Lynch from the RNT is objecting to most of all is the idea of driver-only trains. He goes to work every day on a driver-only train.
Does he really?
He does. It's an absolute joke.
Wow. I don't want us to go without talking about hanging baskets.
Oh, no.
I love a hanging basket. I can't lie. I think they're really nice, don't you, Sam?
I've got two, Bev.
And what have you?
One at the front, one at the back.
And this is Salisbury, the town of. And why are they getting rid of them?
Well,
because they're not... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, they're going to have these living pillars instead, which look ghastly, but apparently it's to save water. It's more environmentally friendly to have these, very kind of green but flowerless living pillars.
Oh,
these
Carol.
And also, they've got a lovely
dragon-shaped... lovely, pretty city.
They've got a gorgeous dragon-shaped planter called Gilbert in the middle of the town. And they're saying that because that takes however many 30,000 litres of water, they want to scrap that as well. But the local residents are up north. Can I just point out this council is run by Labour, Liberal Democrats and Independents. That's all you have to say, really.
Yeah, and, Britain in Bloom is a lovely competition.
Yeah,
it encourages
gorgeous.
all these municipal authorities to have lovely flower displays.
Yeah,
and some of the spa towns...
These living pillars, I mean, they're just awful.
They're ugly.
They're colourless, they're just green and nothing else. The baskets are divine. Absolutely. And they're not biodiverse.
It sort of feels a bit wokey, this.
It does. And also, I think, if you are... Because, obviously, some people put a lot more money into the system than they get out. And I think part of the bargain of that is that you actually have a little bit of beauty in your local area as a kind of payback, that obviously some people are heavy users of services locally and others aren't. And part of I think the social contract is that you have nice parks, you have nice town centres.
Most of us get our bins empties, a bit of street lighting, so it's quite for the 300 and odd every month. So it would be quite nice to keep the hanging baskets. We should start a campaign. Start a campaign.
Well, we have an excellent campaign running at the moment. Are you on side with it, ladies? Don't kill cash.
Have you not signed up?
Absolutely. We have a similar one in the Express.
We've got 140,000, nearly 140,000 signatures. Because it means we can take it to Parliament to have a debate on it and get MPs to stop this.
Because I think all of us here will be some of the next people to get our bank accounts cancelled. Do you not think?
Well, my mother texted the show yesterday to warn me and Andrew, if you keep this up, stop, you're going to lose your bank accounts. You know that. Your newspaper's on side with it as well, Sam?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a big issue for our readers,
it is,
absolutely.
Good.
So, yeah, we're very supportive
And I
of
still
that.
want to keep my checkbooks.
Right.
Still using checkbooks?
We need to go.
I'm using checkbooks.
We've run out of time. We're all going to go away. I think the weather's quite nice today. Don't boil in your own sweat at home.
Be careful.
That's what we've learned today. Thank you for watching us and joining us all week. The live desk with Mark Longhurst and Pip Thompson will be here in just a moment. We'll be back with Britain's Newsroom on Monday at 9:30.
See you then.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most places fine and dry today. There are a few showers around, but they're fading. One place that's going to turn wet and windy, though, is Northern Ireland, thanks to this area of low pressure. There's another one waiting in the wings for the weekend as well. But this one is moving in through the day today, already bringing a lot of cloud. And as the isobars squeeze together, the winds will be picking up. So a wet and windy afternoon for Northern Ireland, some of that rain getting into southwest Scotland. Now, elsewhere, we do have one or two showers across central and northwestern parts of Scotland, one or two scattered across England and Wales earlier, but they're fading. And for most places here, it's a dry and a bright day. Quite a bit of cloud, but with some sunny spells in the south. Temperatures stumbling into the low 20s. A cool feeling day, though, in Northern Ireland, just 15 or 16 here. And that rain likely to be quite heavy for a time, particularly through this evening, spreading into Scotland as well, so turning wet and windy here before midnight. Some of that rain will affect parts of northwest England, north and west Wales, but most of England and Wales likely just to stay dry with clear skies. Temperatures likely to hold up in the teens. So quite a warm night, and that is a trend as we head into Friday. Could be a hot one across the east in particular. Outbreaks of rain across Scotland and Northern Ireland initially, starting to edge away through the day, so probably a drier day in Belfast, but further west across Northern Ireland, likely to be some rain. Even some heavy thundery showers could break out. One or two big showers likely across Scotland, but things also generally